Hey y'all, I wanted to do this last night, but parenting, I had to cut content short. Um, I wanted to talk to y'all about the much trending topic all of a sudden is grief. So I call grief the silent killer out of all the emotions. Why, you may ask? Good question. Grief is the silent killer because sometimes we don't even know we're grieving. Sometimes we may think it's just intense sadness, but it's really grief. Grief shows up when we didn't deal with trauma properly. You know, those ones that we tend to put behind us, tend to put off. Maybe a loss, maybe, you know, friendships, maybe relationships that we never got closure on. Just kind of tend to push it to the back of our minds, hoping that one day it will just flutter away. At least that's what I did with most of the trauma in my life. I just thought it was just going to twinkle itself on out of my life until non-existent anymore. But I was wrong. Grief keep appearing over and over and over until you deal with it properly. One thing about me is that when I started going on a journey of motherhood, when I first had my son, a lot of things was happening back to back to back. My mom's death, my identity changing, um, you know, situations, living situations was changing. Who I was and who I became changed, and grieving past relationships, friendships, all that was on my plate. But I became a mother. Not saying it was a bad thing, it was just becoming a mother took the forefront of everything. So I shoved everything behind me. I shoved it and was like, I'll deal with it later. My mom's death, I'll deal with it later. Breakups, I'll deal with it later. Right now, my kids is my priority because they were so young. Then after I had my first 5 years later, 6 years, 5 years later, I had my second son, and he was going through a lot. So again, I didn't have the time to mourn, to grieve, to do anything because my son was going through autism. And so if you know anything about autism, when you first get, when you first hear the words, you think something is wrong. You think something is like, you kind of think in a sense of Down syndrome. And that's where my head starts spiraling into like, oh my gosh, my son's not going to be able to do things like normal kids, and we're going to have to do this, this, and that. And so I started, again, putting my kids, my son's needs in front of everything, right? So dealing with that, I dealt with that for years. My son screaming, I didn't know why. He was late talking. He was nonverbal for a long time, so about 6. He's 8 now, so he's a little bit better when it comes to verbalization. But it was so rocky at first because we were comparing my first son to him, to my second son, which don't do that. Each one of your children are different. Nobody told me that, of course. My mom, she died, and I really didn't have a mother figure, so things became kind of chaotic quickly. Um, Working with him and his needs, I was pregnant again with my third son. And that's a whole other story for another time because he had his own issues coming into the world that I was not expecting. So I didn't have time to grieve my own life, who I became, who I was not, who I thought I was, where I was in my life, where I wanted to be. I was so wrapped up in motherhood. So fast forward to my sons are older now, more independent, less needy. Grief showed right on back up at my doorstep. Grief was like, hey, remember me? And when grief reappears into your life, it's like a goddamn freight train coming to hit you because now not only are you grieving, but everything is making sense. why you act the way you act, why I was so distant, why I was so irritable, why I was so moody most of the time. It wasn't because of situations and my triggers that was happening now. It was from the grief I didn't deal with before. And so it showed up. It showed up in my marriage, showed up in my friendship, showed up situations where I didn't have any control over it. And one thing about grief, it will drag you down. Eternal sadness could disrupt your organs. It could mess with you internally. Chest pain, tight chest, back aches, brain fog. And then we start to lose memory. Grief is a silent killer of the emotions. Of course, too many of negative emotions could have negative impact on your body, but we don't even know when we need to grieve or if this sadness is grief. Because most of the time we just think we're just sad. But the one thing about grief is that it doesn't go away. Grief keeps showing up until you properly deal with it, until you actually are able to overcome that situation. Like I said earlier, sometimes we think we need closure. Sometimes we feel like it was unfair the way people treated us. And sometimes we hold on to that negative trauma, hoping that somebody will come rescue us from it and relieve us from these heartaches. And or sometimes we kind of like pile things on top to make it seem like that we're not sad, oh, my life is fine. But behind closed doors, you're not. Grief can also lead you to a depression like it did me, all because I didn't properly move on. I didn't close those books like I was supposed to. So I say all that to say, real quick before the minions get up, I say all that to say, if you're grieving a loss, if you're grieving a relationship, if you're grieving a friendship, take time, little by little, of course, not going to happen all overnight, but take time to grieve, cry, release, because grief could be massive. It's like a never-ending well almost, because sometimes we just fill up that bucket, we just fill up that well. It holds all our tears, all our sadness. We feel like we don't have the time to deal. Make time to grieve, or it will keep showing up in your life in unexpected situations. Make time to release. Don't hold on to it, because the more you hold on to it, the harder it's going to be to come off.